And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're taking a look at a game called Skyliners from Z-Man Games, and this is a game about building skyscrapers with these little buildings here, but it's more about building skyscrapers from your perspective. Now, Skyliners comes with a basic game and a full game, or standard game and full game. The standard game is really not that good because it gives a huge advantage to the first person. It's mostly in there so you play through it and you're like, oh, okay, that's basically the gist of how buildings and seeing things works. So you want to play the full game. It's not like the full game is that difficult, and I'm about to explain it to you now anyway. At the beginning of the game, you're going to put some random cities on the board. You're going to do that by drawing cards like this, and so this shows me that a random building goes here. The park always goes in the middle spot. Then the next person will show that the park's there, so they have a random building there. Then the next person has it there, so it's always from that person's perspective. Next person there. Oh, we're building a nice area around it. Then over here. So these would be some neutral buildings that will be at the beginning. Each player is also going to get a pile of buildings in their color. The number depends on the number of players. They're going to get some antennas. They're going to get a scoring marker. This is this dove that you kind of put here in the box, and you'll be moving around the outside, which is quite possibly one of the most annoying scoring markers ever. And players are also going to start with a park piece. So they have some buildings, they have some two roof pieces, and a park piece. Players also are going to have a pile of cards that they're going to be using. Now, what players are trying to do in this game is they're going to be placing their buildings on the board. On your turn, you have two actions that you can take. Your first action is always to put a building out. So you can put a building here, or maybe you have a park. You can put a park, but a park can't go on top of a building, and a building can't go on top of a park. You also have roof pieces. They can go on top of a building. They can never go just on the ground. And it's really interesting. They actually made them so that they fit on a building perfectly, but don't fit on a ground piece. It doesn't actually fit. Once a roof's on a building, nothing else can go on that building. So players are going to be taking turns placing different buildings around different areas. And you can make buildings get higher. It doesn't matter what pieces are in your way. So your first action is always going to be putting out a building. The second can also be putting out a building, or you can place a card. Now what you're trying to do with these cards, you're going to put these cards in this chair mechanism here. So you put the card down, but the number, the spot you put it, this is what you're trying to do. So this says in C, this is the red player. So let's turn it here. The red player says in column C, they want to be able to see exactly 3 buildings. So if I look at this from this perspective, you see they can only see 2 buildings. So for this to work, they will need to make at least one of the buildings behind tall enough so that they can see exactly 3 buildings. And they don't want another building behind that. So here they could see 3 buildings, so that one would be completed. So your first action is building something, your second action can be building, or it can be putting a card in here. And players are going to take turns doing this, putting cards in here in any order you want. If you don't get your card in there in time, you're not going to be able to score it. But at the same time, if you put the cards in there too early, you'll probably get them wrong. When one person runs out of normal building pieces, the game ends, and then you take your chair, and this is pretty neat. You take it, you fold it like that, and you flip it over, and this way you can see what, so this says the person in C, they want to be able to see one building here. So one building, and we look, and they can see 3 buildings. So that card is incorrect. Then this player here, the green player, says 1 building. I look, and they can only see 1 building in that row. So they get to keep this card, and they get a point for that building, and they get to put an antenna in that building. Once an antenna is in the building, no other antennas can be in the building, and each antenna is going to be worth a point at the end of the game. So putting your cards in first lets you get antennas out more quickly. Again, you can keep score with these seagulls as you're doing this, but likely you're going to get really irritated about doing that and simply just use some other scoring method like paper or an app. After everyone is done scoring all their cards, you also are going to check at the beginning of the game. Each player gets one of these, and this shows you a quadrant of the board. And so this, for example, says southeast. So southeast, these 9, if they contain the tallest building on the board, I will get some extra points. And don't forget, you get points for antennas also in the parks and the buildings. Whoever has the most points is the winner. Now this game has a great visual effect. If you've noticed, the board itself is placed on top of a plastic inlay in the box. And this is pretty cool because you're using the box to play. It's not as cool when you try to store everything because there really isn't a lot of room to store in here. In fact, there's no room for the cards. You have to like spread them out across the top. Or pull this up from the bottom and put them underneath. Either way, it's a little bit annoying in that regard, but it still is cool that you have this. The scoring track around the outside, like I said, is ridiculous. I don't know why anyone would use that. The buildings themselves are high quality buildings. I like how they fit together. The game's pretty easy. When you put a building out, it's not your building. You're just building buildings that are out there. So it doesn't matter if you put white on top of red on top of yellow. Some people have said, is this like Manhattan? Well, in that you put buildings on top of each other, but other than that, it's a very different game. Here it's all about perspective. Now, it's much easier to see one building than 5. You just make the one that's closest to you very high. 5 buildings gives you more points, but then you have to say small, bigger, 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 bigger. The person across from you is doing maybe the exact opposite. If I have 5, the only way it's going to work is if they only want to see one building. And even if they only want to see, maybe they want to see 2, they can still mess me up in that regard. So it's really intriguing how the game plays because you are working for yourself, but you're also working for someone else. And there's also a little bit of a push your luck aspect because you have these cards that you're going to be sticking in there. But when's the best time? You do it quicker. That means you go first, you might get antennas, but you're also kind of committing. If I wait to the end, I'm like, I see, I only am going to see 2 in that row and put them in there. Now, it's natural in this game for people to fight where that tallest tower is, but it's only a couple points, and I don't think it's worth fighting over that nearly as much as it is worth just basically making sure the cards you put out match correctly. The good news is this game is very short. The box here says 30 minutes. I think 30 minutes is the high end, honestly. It's not that complex of a game. You probably could play it in 20 minutes. You're just, you can set up very quickly. You grab your buildings, you put them out, boom, boom, boom. And you might sit there and agonize and say, okay, what should I do here? But usually for the most part, you're building, reacting to the other people building. You have a little bit of a long-term strategic plan, but it's mostly tactical. And if you put a card in early, trying to complete that. There will come times where you're like, guess that card isn't happening at this point, but you still have 4 other columns to work in. I like it. It's different than what I had anticipated it to be, but I like the idea of the perspective from my point of view, and I felt like I was actively working against the other players to do so. So some intriguing ideas, some except for the scoring, some very good components, and a very visually appealing game. I think you should take a look here at Skyliners. Dice Tower Judgment approved!
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door.
There.